Yeah,
Thank you.
just to give you a little of history on why we ended up at this particular place. Gary and I had no intentions of looking at really fees, and then we started getting phone calls for things that were not, things, things that were not on our fee sheet. For instance, we had someone call on a solar array or solar field, and we looked at our fee schedule, and according to our fee schedule, we gave him a particular price. So I called him and I said, it's X dollars. And he said, okay, that's X dollars per acre. And I said, no, sir, that's X dollars for the whole entire 145 acres. So we then started realizing that we weren't addressing some of the new things that are coming out. Car chargers is another one that's becoming more and more popular as everyone starts to go toward Priuses and things like that. We didn't have a fee schedule for those. So what we did is we started revamping this fee schedule that was originally from 2008. So I'll just go through some of these. Right now, the total permit cost for a single-family dwelling, as you can see, Warren County is on the lower side. We are one of the lowest because we really haven't changed things since 2008, and really, we don't want to be the highest. The new system, of course, is going to be another cost for us, and with this new system, we wanted to make sure that we were up and running August 1st, and with that, these new fees would benefit us because they would already be in the system. It wouldn't be something that we would have to change later. If you look at what we're suggesting or what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to add a processing fee of $50, which is brand new. Our building, electric, and HVA base fee would increase $50, making it $100 total. And then there is a certificate of occupancy. What's happening now, of course, as everyone knows, there's a shortage on everything. So we would like to charge for the certificate of occupancies, but we're also adding a temporary certificate of occupancy. That way, if for some reason materials aren't in and they can't get a garage door or certain things, then they're...
People are trying to close on loans, and if we have a temporary CO available, that will allow them to go ahead and close their loan, lock in their rate. We're actually helping the consumers by doing that. We just charge them a fee.
And so what happens is they can close with that temporary, and then in 30 days, maybe 60 days, whatever, then they're able to get their actual certificate of occupancy. So adding those fees still keeps us in the middle. It doesn't make us one of the highest. It takes us out of the lowest, but it still keeps us in the middle. So again, we don't want to be the highest, but we do want to make sure that we're in the middle with everyone else and that we're getting paid to do what we do. What happens a lot of times too is that we're charging a fee, and then we have to go back out for another inspection and back out for another inspection. And hopefully what we've done by adding this is that we won't have to have another charge at the end. It'll be more transparent. This is what you're being charged, and you're not being added on at the end.
The home builders typically absorb that cost, but they don't like to be surprised by it. So if we can just build that into the system and build in a couple of re-inspect fees, they seem to be much more willing to accept that than to find out on the day of closing they got to pay 2 more inspection fees.
So if you're a normal home, how many times do you go out to inspect them during the building process?
Typical house could probably be 6 trips maybe, and then if they get turned down, that turns into 8, and then because of the temporary COs, it could be more.
And have we done a review of what our costs actually are for doing this?
What we do is we went by what we charge, because we go by inspector. So it's the inspection, it's the gas. Also, sometimes there's a revision, so then it's plan review. Currently, we hire either Gary or Ron does our residential, but then for commercial, we hire that out through Greg Nichols, so that's an increased cost. So what we looked at, if I can go to the next screen, is we went ahead and we looked compared to Lebanon, Clinton County, Franklin, Hamilton, Montgomery, Greene, Claremont. Greene County didn't offer us much information, but what we did is we wanted to show that we did contact all these other jurisdictions, making sure that we were within what they're doing, and also Claremont County now, they contacted us yesterday. They wanted to see how we were paying our inspectors because everyone's kind of concerned how everybody else is doing it. So we're trying to make sure that we're all on the same page so that builders aren't kind of, I think, hit different ways from different communities, that we're all more similar. So nobody has any surprises.
And I saw that the Home Builders Association supported this. They obviously are recognizing that there's an issue with the costs associated with this.
Exactly. We had, and of course, I certainly want to say a public thank you to Mr. John Cowan and Stuart Cowan, because they worked with us and the home builders, Cincinnati Home Builders Association. We had a lot of sit-down meetings. We had some emails and texts and different things, and then John presented it before the HBA, and we do have a letter of support from them as well.
Okay, going back to my question, so did we actually have an idea of how much it costs us to do this?
Well, if you figure it, first of all, it depends on the inspector, because different inspectors are paid different wages. But if you take the average inspection over that 6, you're looking at approximately, we figured around $475, $480. And normally we're charging $200, $250.
Okay, but we're charging, you're talking about a current fee of $1,000-some.
Well,
And
right,
then you're
that
now
doesn't
going
include
for
plan
1,300.
review, that doesn't include any of the, what we have to do is the permit comes in, we have to input it, then we have to do calculations, so there's a lot of processes to even get it to the inspectors. We didn't count those.
In addition to the hourly wage, there's also truck fuel, truck maintenance, stuff like that that's calculated into it too.
Are we doing more inspections now than we used to do? So in other words, we've got a set cost for the office, right?
Right.
And so we've got people, we pay them regardless of how many inspections are going on. We have a certain amount of overhead, we have vehicles, and those are the expenses. So are we having increased costs within our department? Naturally, because we pay people more, is that going on?
Well, and we also purchased the tablets, and we're going to, of course, be needing to upgrade those vehicles. It's now 42 weeks to get a vehicle, so we have 2 of those that we need to order. So there's a lot of increased costs. Last year was we did more permits last year than we ever have. This year, we're kind of on track, but we're not there yet. I don't know what the end numbers will be, but last year was the busiest year that we've ever had.
But we haven't
Ever.
increased these in,
2008.
yeah.
There's been a few
14
things,
years, so.
right, there's been a few things that have been before you. For instance, the commercial, at one point in time, Mr. Sperling came before you and they changed it to graduated fees. Graduated fees for us are they're a little more difficult, they're harder to explain. We think that going from the graduated fees to a straight fee of $7.50 makes it so much easier than saying, well, it's kind of a bell curve. So on the graduated fee, you're gonna go up, and then it could come down depending on your square feet. It was just much more complicated. I think what we're proposing makes things so much easier to understand. And like you said, since 2008, we haven't, asked for any increased fees. This just, again, puts us in the middle. It doesn't put us in the top.
And what
we
is
also-
the,
I'm sorry.
let's go, did you get, what does Mason charge, do you know?
I have them on paper. I don't know that they're actually in. City of Mason for a single-family dwelling charges $2,070.50.
All right, anything else?
We also had a couple of items that we actually reduced or completely removed. For instance, during the storms last night, we had 4 inspectors out on the road until after 10 o'clock last night at no charge to anyone to do evaluations of trees and houses. We had a nursing home in Franklin that was damaged. We don't charge anything for that, and we've actually put that on paper now, that if you're in a situation where you have a storm come through or
Fire damage.
fire or whatever, we don't make you buy a permit. We'll get an inspector to you immediately at no charge to help you evaluate and talk to the insurance company.
Okay. Is that it? Any questions, further questions?
This is very simple for me. I mean, obviously, we haven't done it in 14 years. We're not going to the top of the list. The one adversely affected group that could be against this is the HBA. Appreciate you all working with them. And, when you explain things to people and you take the reasonable approach, the adversely affected party is saying, yeah, I get it, go ahead. That, all I need to hear there, because you guys have looked at this a heck of a lot more than I have, so.
Do you all, the Cowans, want to say anything about it?
Well, I would like to thank the council
Yep, Stuart, can you give us your name and address?
Stuart Cowan, Somerset Custom Homes. I would like to thank the commissioners and stuff. I mean, this is how this is supposed to work, industry and government working together in order to make a reasonable amount of fee based on a reasonable amount of return for us. When Michelle first presented this to us with the tablets and the ability to actually get real-time information almost instantaneous like everybody does on their cell phone today, but having this done with the government and stuff that we deal with, it was just kind of a no-brainer for us. So, and as long as we don't mind paying the fees as long as there's some benefit, and this has got to be some great benefit for us. So thank you again very much for your support on this.
Okay, yeah, I mean, ultimately, the people that pay for this are the people that buy homes. But it does seem like a relatively reasonable amount, given the amount of work that you all put into it. You want to make a motion to adopt these? Do we need a resolution to adopt the fee structure?
Is this a public hearing?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to close.
Okay, wait a second. Do we need to allow anybody else to speak first?
Yeah.
Yes, but, are we advertised for 2 public hearings?
No, just one.
Do we have to have two?
I'm thinking, yeah, let me double check, I thought we had to have 2.
Okay, well, you're double checking. Does anybody else in the room want to speak to this issue? All right.
Well, I'll make a motion to close this public hearing.
Second?
Yes? What's that? Yes? It's fine. Any discussion?
We'll just see if we've got to do another one or if we can act right now.
Same, we've never done two before.
We've never
Never
done
done
2
two
before
before.
on these issues, but
That doesn't mean that we won't.
Well, maybe we have to.
We'll learn something new every day, I guess.
It's okay if we've never done it before.
I don't ever remember doing it the first time, so it sounds like the last time you did this was back in 2008.
we've made some adjustments like on the pool permitting, I think.
Exactly, there was a few little things.
Yeah, a few little things, but not, and in that case, we were eliminating some of the fees associated with.
737, I think it's paragraph C. Get there. A regulation code or amendment may be adopted under this section only after a public hearing and not fewer than 2 regular or special sessions of the board. Which shall cause notice to be published in the newspaper general circulation, and you can bump that down to 1 as long as we put it on our county website, which I assume we do in our advertisement.
Yes.
We're good. Make a motion to adopt the new fee schedule.
Second?
Yes. Okay. We're done?
Thank you all for the work you did on this.
Thank you. It's good to see you, Stuart.
Can you do that?
Thanks.
All right, bye, Stuart.
We need to set that for a second hearing. What I meant by bumping down to 1 was the advertisement, not the hearing.
Okay, so we can't pass it today.
Well, it can't take effect, so put
So
it
we'll-
on for next week, have a second hearing, no one will show up, and then adopt it effective as of next week. Well, not effective, it has to wait 30 days.
So what did we just do then? Help me here.
So we have to have another hearing next week, pro forma, so we need to put it on the agenda for next week.
Okay.
Well, okay,
Whatever. All right.
we'll do that. All right, so we have, the next is a work session on indigent defense fee maximum allowances. Do we have someone from the Bar Association here? All right.
Good morning, not your honor.
Thank you.
My name is Andrea Ostrowski. I am from the Warren County Bar Association. I am back, along with Judge Kirby, to discuss the caps or the maximum fee allotment for the Warren County Court-Appointed Program. I previously provided the standards for the public defender. The commissioners need to set the standard cap for appellate work, misdemeanor work, common pleas criminal, and then common pleas juvenile division. And I know that Judge Oda was here last time and gave his piece and presented his position on that. I know Judge Kirby is here today to take his position, and ultimately it is up to you. I took the position that it was just easier to present to you what the public defenders has suggested as the maximum cap fees, because you need to set it across the board for a variety of courts. So I'm just asking that you adopted the maximum cap fee, what the reimbursement would be from the Ohio Public Defender for what they set forth in their guidelines. Does anybody need a second copy of that? Mr. Grossman, since you weren't here before?
Yeah, sure. Why don't you give me that? What is the amount that you're recommending?
So it's a table, it breaks it down because you have to go by the level of the offense and then the court that you're within. So that's where this comes into play, because it breaks it down for the trial level proceedings, and then it breaks it down for the juvenile court proceedings, and within that table, it sets forth kind of the different type of work that was involved in the different level of the charges filed. And then it also talks about the appellate proceeding as well, and then at the very end, the post-conviction habeas proceedings. So it breaks it down by the court and then the type. So it's case-specific to some degree, in that it's dependent upon the underlying charges or case involvement.
Okay, so now, explain to me how this works.
Yes, sir.
First off, you're recommending a fee rate of $75 per hour?
That was adopted by the county commissioners a few weeks ago in your absence by a vote of 2 that voted in favor of it. So the hourly rate for the court-appointed program or counsels is now $75 in court and out of court.
Okay, and what was it before that?
It was $50 out of court and $60 in court.
Well, $75 an hour for a lawyer seems awfully reasonable, so I have no problem with that. And then the $125
Seems a little
per
high to
hour-
me.
$125 an hour. Yeah, and I think people who do financial services should be paid, I don't know, $25 an hour. But anyway, $125 an hour is for death
That-
penalty cases?
Yeah, that's death penalty. That's completely separate and apart. Like that is not, how that is handled is different, but that is what the OPD will pay, and that's what I think you guys have to do for death penalty cases. But then, so let's say, sir, that Annette Raleigh goes through arraignment and sends me an email and says, "Hey, Andrea, you were appointed on John Smith. He or she is in the county jail. Let me know that you received this email." All right, thanks, Annette. I'll put it on my kind of mental head to track that. So I go and I look up John Smith's indictment over in the Common Pleas Court. John Smith got indicted on an F3 fleeing and eluding and an F5 possession of drugs, because once the car ran from the police, they ultimately stopped him and found drugs in the car. So the OPD will reimburse Warren County, currently at the rate of 100%, for a third-degree felony of up to $5,000. OPD says that up to $5,000, we agree that case could take, and therefore we will reimburse at 100%. Now, Judge Oda and Judge Teep and Judge Peeler will review my bill and determine whether or not that's an appropriate amount of time and money that was spent on it. If it's a typical, pretty easy plea case through Warren County, I probably won't hit $500. If I go above $500, I have to write a letter to the judge and explain why I went above $500, and that's pursuant to the local rule. Judge Oda, Judge Teep, or Judge Peeler, who's ever assigned to my case, will then review my bill, kind of think about what work I did in court, what my letter says about how much discovery I received, and determine. As long as I'm under the $5,000, if that's what the county commissioners set as the limit, OPD will reimburse the county, and I believe the general pool fund, 100% of my bill. County court or common pleas court will get deducted from their budget line my $500 that I submitted. But the county gets it back in their other pocket through the general pool fund through OPD. So OPD says that you set the maximum rate over what they will reimburse, and they are willing to reimburse up to these levels for all of this breakdown of offenses. Am I correct, Mr. Nolan?
Everything he says accurate.
Thank you.
All right, so now, going back, there's an hourly rate, and then there is a capped amount. So regardless of the amount of time you spend, you can't go over these caps. Is that how this works?
From a reimbursement from OPD, yes. I can file a motion with Judge Oda, and let's say that my third-degree felony lasted, had a 5-day trial on it, and I got X amount of hours of discovery and police cruiser cam and everything, and I went over $5,000. Judge Oda has the wherewithal, or the ability, I should say, to grant me extraordinary fees from his budget. That is not reimbursed by OPD. So this is the amount that OPD will reimburse. If I want more than $5,000, then Judge Oda and their way of handling it has to be approved. But this is what up to OPD will reimburse the county.
Okay, so let's say that what we do today, or what we've had in the past, results in additional money being paid over what OPD reimburses.
Then that's an issue, and that's what the judges will decide if that's in their budget and what they want to pay and what they think the case.
I get you, but
Yes.
that comes out of the Warren County's general fund?
Mr. Nolan, I don't,
It'll come out of the court's budget, which is going to be based on the general fund, yes.
Okay. And so if we take a look at the past, how much has the court been spending on this program to date? Do we have a front, like last year, how much did we spend, the year before that? And what's the projection of the increase based upon what we do today? Do we know?
I can pull those numbers, but it's going to be very close to zero. It is very, very rare that an attorney goes over these numbers. I mean, it's very rare. I can pull
So
it. It's
is
very-
it accurate then that we seldom have any money taken out of the court's budget, which comes from our general fund, for this program?
What Mr. Strelski was explaining is it always comes out of the budget. So it comes out from the right hand and then gets replaced by the left hand.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Is
But
that-
if you net it out, I think what you're asking, Tom, if you net it out, it's going to net out at zero. It's just in two different buckets.
Well, that's what I'm asking. I'm asking is what we do, I want to know the financial impact of what we're doing today on our budget, and it sounds like it's either zero or negligible.
But I mean, the one way that it can impact our budget is if it exceeds the max, then it theoretically comes out of our budget. So my question is, wouldn't it be in our best interest to have the maximum slightly higher than what we think, simply because we're gonna get reimbursed 100% up to that maximum from the state?
I think the request is to set it at the state maximum, is what the request is.
and that's an excellent point, Commissioner Young, because not to throw Judge Kirby under the bus, but he knows me. And so here it comes, Judge Kirby. What Judge Kirby is proposing is to limit the amount that attorneys can bill, which means that when OPD looks at what you guys have set forth for the juvenile court, they're going to say, we're only going to reimburse up to the $1,500 that you adopt, if you adopt Judge Kirby's proposed schedule, which means that any extraordinary fees would then directly come from the general budget, because OPD will not reimburse for that. OPD will reimburse up to the schedule that you set, and their maximum schedule is what I proposed. So if you propose for juvenile court a lower number than what OPD sets forth in their schedule, that is what they will adopt. They will say that is what the county commissioners have said. That is the maximum that we will pay up to our reimbursement rate, which means if Judge Kirby was to ever grant extraordinary fees, it would not then be covered by the OPD, which is why setting the fees at the maximum amount, which is what the public defenders have set forth, then you know that they're willing to reimburse up to that maximum amount.
And you're talking about for both, sorry, the juvenile, probate, and common pleas?
Yes, so you guys set the caps for the appellate work, the common pleas criminal, the common pleas juvenile, and the misdemeanor. And so OPD has set forth all of those top line that they're willing to reimburse to. And Judge Kirby is limiting that amount of reimbursement.
Okay, so before we get to that proposal, how many times do the courts grant extenuating circumstances for which they pay higher than what is in the schedule?
Typically in a criminal case, it's very rare. If you have a long trial or something, you might go over what the previous cap had been. With the increase in the caps, I don't know what that would look like. Common pleas court, I think it's rare that they would go over those caps. It would be that extraordinary case that Judge Oda talked about. You know, for Judge Kirby, I've been practicing in his court for numerous years, has had a no extraordinary fee policy. So getting extraordinary fees from Judge Kirby, it takes an act of God. And it very, 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 very rarely happens. I have been in court on contested hearings where I can't even get reimbursed for the time that I physically sat in his court for 3 days because somebody hired private counsel and drew out a case. And Judge Kirby has been made known of that all the court-appointed attorneys sat in his courtroom and we were requesting extraordinary fees, and we've all been told no. So Judge Kirby has a very flat rate, no extraordinary fee policy, which is also why the caps to me matter.
Well, again, that's within the judge's purview, but Counselor, so if the fee, the normal fee for a case is $1,000, let's say, the state max, or our max has always been $3,000, and then all of a sudden we raise it to $5,000, let's say, you still have to get whatever that fee is approved by the judge, even if it's always been $1,000 and now it goes to $2,000, or even if you're requesting $4,000, the judge has to approve any of that, correct?
Correct. So they will approve, Judge Kirby will approve up to whatever the maximum cap is and then do a handwritten strike through.
But is he compelled to reimburse up to the max? So that's my question is, if we've always had a $1,000 fee that's always been going on.
Right.
Now, and we've always had, a $2,000, let's say, max.
Right.
And now all of a sudden we raise it to a $4,000 max.
It is within Judge Kirby, Judge Oda, Judge Peeler, Judge Teep's purview and discretion to review any attorney bill and have a conversation with that attorney and determine whether or not they believe that amount of time was spent. And they can strike any bill without question, sir. That is within their purview. And that is but I can only submit a bill ethically for the time that I've spent on a case. So if I say to Judge Oda or Judge Kirby, I spent 6 hours in court, he's going to say, I didn't see you in the court for 6 hours. That's not right.
Fair enough, but on your, and again, this is a good, I guess, where I'm thinking about this. So as it stands now, do most of your cases, are you trying to be reimbursed for the max allowed?
No, sir. So when I was an attorney dedicated for CASA, my bill would be $300, $400, $500 for a typical A&D case through disposition. Those are short hearings. And when COVID hit and we were doing it over the phone, they were even shorter. I review discovery, I send emails. Over in common pleas on a criminal case, typically if it's a typical plea case, I don't even know if I'll hit $500 to have to write a letter. I mean, I can only ethically bill for the time that I spend. And as Judge Kirby has explained, or Judge Oda explained, we have a day and a time to appear at court. I have to appear over there at 9:15. I'm the only one on the docket for 9:15. So my time on Judge Oda's docket is from 9:15 to 9:30. And so if I talk to my client a little bit, if I talk to the prosecutor afterwards, I'm not going to Montgomery County and sitting in a cattle call for 2 to 3 hours waiting for my case to be called. For Judge Kirby in juvenile court, it's the same thing. I have a select time, and I am to be there, and I'm to be prepared to be presenting during my time. Even his contempt hearings, which I don't partake in anymore, but I've been in the court when they've been there, they're not a huge cattle call. They're done in an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and he does attorneys first to get us through the door.
Right, I just want to make sure that we're not going to the max. Every case isn't to the max right now, and then if we raise that to the state, every case is going to go to the state max.
I will say this. I have heard through the grapevine that there are probably attorneys that probably push those boundary lines. And I have expressed my opinion as followed. It is when the judge's discretion to review every bill. And if they don't believe that the bill is appropriate, they need to take appropriate action. ethically, I can only bill for the time that I can justify that I spent on a case, and not every single one of my bill is to the maximum. And I shouldn't be penalized if I do the work to have a lower cap because other people are not as ethical or the judges aren't using their discretion.
Thank you, Counselor. You presented a very strong case. for
Thank you.
your position. Perhaps we can listen to the counterparty now.
Can I add one thing to this discussion? It's in regard to the reimbursements that we receive from the state. It is currently 100%. They are saying probably this fall it will go to 90%. For many years it was 40% or 70%. So right now it is 100%. Going to 90, that 10% would impact again the general fund.
Okay, Judge Kirby?
Morning, Judge.
So I'll start with what Tiffany had just mentioned. When I saw the guidelines that came out by the Public Defender's Office, I was a little surprised. I did that work for 18 years before I became a full-time judge, so you kind of get a feel of what a case is worth. Sometimes you make money on cases, sometimes you lose money on cases, just the way it goes sometimes. And then they came out with this, we're going to reimburse 100%, now they're down to 90. And I don't know how the state's going to sustain it, quite frankly. I keep thinking in my mind it's going to go lower and lower and lower. So they lure you in on this, it's not going to cost you anything. What you pay out today, you'll get back tomorrow. I think it's going to change, and I think next year might be a sign of that, but I can't see into the future. I don't know that that's going to happen. Andrea's right, and I appreciate her efforts, and Marcelina Woods' efforts in trying to get more money for the bar. They do court a great service. Some people think that juvenile court is, baby court, it's baby law, and I'll submit this to you. What we do is a bigger deal than a lot of people give us credit for. We do the worst thing that you can do to a parent. We can take their child forever. We strip them of their parental rights, and that's probably the worst thing that can happen to anybody. And in those cases, they're typically starting out with a dependent neglect case. We could have upwards of 5 different lawyers on them. And we rely on the court-appointed system for that because most people in the private practice don't get hired privately to take those cases because they're like luggage. You keep them forever, and they can go on for years, and a lot of times they do. It was interesting that Andrea said that sometimes when she's up against a lawyer who's been privately retained, they kind of drag it out. Well, so do sometimes some of the public defenders. You increase the cap, they're going to drag it out, arguably. I don't know if the private counsels do it. I imagine the public defender's office do it, if you take her line of reasoning. And we do have to review it, but all I'm looking at are line items that says that they were in court and they did this and they did that, and they don't jump off the page. There was a lawyer in Dayton one time that billed for 25 hours a day. He got caught, because obviously that's not possible. Ours, or they come in at 0.5 increments, and I think the numbers that we have do need to be increased, and so we increased them proportionately with the hourly rate that I think you all have already agreed to, the $75 or per hour for inside or outside of court. So it is an increase on about 7 different levels on 7 different types of cases. I think it's fair. She is right. I do take a very hard line approach against extraordinary fees. And when she says it's very, 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 and she said it like 10 times, she's right. I probably have done it 10 times maybe. The thing about it is, once I do it on one, it gets out, and all of a sudden I get 5 more just like it by the end of the day. That's just how it works, and it's, coincidentally, I don't know, but that just seems how it works, and so it's hard to tell one person yes, and then 4 people no. So once I do it for 1, I'm doing it for 5 on any particular case. And it adds up. Our attorneys' bills have historically been kind of high because of all of our cases that we have. Children in the delinquency cases, they're all presumed to be indigent, so they all get a free lawyer. And so we rely on the new lawyers that are coming up in the ranks, because that's where we all cut our teeth as juvenile court. But we count on some of the seasoned lawyers to stick around because we want their expertise, especially when I'm getting ready to take a child from a parent and strip them of their rights forever. So I'm not in favor of the amount that's been pitched by the Public Defender's Office, and that's why I gave you what my proposal was for juvenile court.
What was that proposal?
Tom, it's saying that's the paper, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
So what they've proposed is, do they have a proposal here for juvenile court as well? I see it, yeah, juvenile proceedings. Okay. And I guess that if we adopt, Judge, your numbers, are those the current numbers now, or are these?
Let me see what you're looking at. Is this here?
Here's the current. Here's the current, and then
That's the one with 650.
So you're going above, you're raising it.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, their point was that the Ohio Public Defenders will set as the maximum that they will reimburse whatever the maximum we set is. So that if we don't go to the Ohio Public Defender's recommended fee schedule, that when a lawyer is charging more than the maximum, and it's not up to the maximum of the public defender's fee schedule, that has to be a special fee that you would have to approve, but it will come directly from our budget.
And you know what, Andrea, I don't know that I agree with that. I don't know if our cap is 1,000 and Andrea submitted a request for 1,500 and I paid it, I'm not so sure we don't get the $1,500 back if I've approved it.
I'd have to look at it. My understanding is they adopt the county's proposal, so it'd be $1,000, but I'd have to look into it. It doesn't happen very often.
Chelsea Nichols would know that probably offhand because she submits all of our vouchers, but I was under the impression that we got reimbursed, but I don't do it that often.
So, okay, so here's where I'm going with my question. Since you're not disputing the hourly rate, are you?
The $75?
Yes.
No, I think
Okay.
it's a good step.
All right, so I'm glad that I get to ask a judge a question. This is very unusual. So any event, given that fact, and given the fact that you review and have control of all of their fees, what difference does it make to you that the maximum is higher? Because if you decide that they shouldn't get the maximum, you have the right to say no, right?
If I had any fee request in front of me that I didn't think was reasonable, I'd have the chance and the opportunity to not pay it all.
Okay,
So that's a yes.
You're right. So in other words, our setting of a different maximum than you're recommending doesn't actually require you to do anything different with regard to how you determine what fees are paid to that lawyer. But the thing that may make a difference to us and since we are charged with the financial, budgeting and spending, et cetera, of the county, we care about the implications to our budget. And since you can set the fees regardless of the max, and since the maximum apparently implicates our getting reimbursement, isn't it more advantageous to us to raise the maximum amount allowable to what the Ohio Public Defenders will reimburse, while at the same time knowing that you have complete control over their fees and that the maximum really doesn't make any difference to you? They've told us it doesn't make any difference, but in any event, that it doesn't really implicate your setting of the fees. Do you see where I'm going with that? So I'm wondering why we wouldn't raise the maximum, knowing that your concerns can still be addressed. Can you
Well-
explain to me why that is wrong?
Well, first of all, my budget request next year will be larger because my fees are going to be higher. Especially if I have a policy that's well-known that I don't ever approve extraordinary fee requests. That tells me that the money that we've been paying out in the past is going to be increased in the future because we know now they're going to exceed that because I've historically have denied those requests. So those are coming in. Right now, they're at 100% reimbursement, which is great. Matt's going to get the money back, and it's going to come back to the coffers. Next year, you're only going to get 90%. What happens in 2024? Is it going to go down to 80% and 70%, and do we keep adjusting it? I just set what I thought would be a reasonable amount for a particular case that comes in front of me, because again, I've practiced in that court. I did these kind of cases. Just one example, I think the felony 1s and 2s is $5,000 for a felony 1 and 2. I get a rape a week. So that's $5,000, where right now I'm paying $1,000.
Why can't you tell the people in the come practice before you that you believe that the attorneys shouldn't be charging any more than what you've given us, regardless of what the state maximum is and what we agree is the maximum that they could charge, and you say, you know what, but I'm the judge here, I know better, which I'm not disputing that you know better, and that I'm not going to allow you to have a fee over that amount. Is there anything we would do today that prohibits you from doing that? In
Well,
other words-
I already do that.
That's what I thought.
But I cap it at 1,000. And if you allowed for the public defender's suggested fees, I will need to scrutinize it to see if my original $1,000 was fair, or if I'm going to approve the one for $4,900 because the new cap's 5,000.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, Judge. I appreciate your point of view here a lot. I think juvenile cases are particularly tough, and so I admire the work and appreciate the work that you do. I think it's really hard, and I think that, you know, from my perspective, of all of the public servants in this space, those who represent the indigent are put in a lot more hours than they ever get to bill for because they are grueling cases. There is only one advocate that represents the interest of the child, and you're having to balance all kinds of interests in your cases. They're incredibly complex, but I have a special place in my heart for those who do this work, and I just know it's way more labor intensive than even in the criminal court. I think they last a really long time. There's a lot of people intervening in on them because, to your point, it's taking away a parental right should have a very high standard, but oftentimes there's collateral damage in the process. And, you know, I have been really active in working with the state association over 2 state budget cycles to get the substantial increase that the governor and members of the General Assembly over 2 budgets put in to be able to try to keep counties whole. And I come from this from the standpoint that this is a state responsibility, that like many state responsibilities get pushed to the counties without the appropriate funding. And so we're going to have to continue to, as an association, demand that the state be able to pay for the increasing costs associated with this. And whether or not we're successful in doing that, to your point, remains to be seen. I mean, the reason why that allocation is not going to cover 100% of the cost is because the costs are going up, arguably because they need to go up. I mean, nobody is talking about an increase in the fee schedule, whether it's your request or the bar's request. everybody is saying costs associated with these cases are going up. So that's built in. And so, you know, this has been the number one issue that the county commissioners have advocated for, because there is a need to remedy this. And so, you know, part of me is like, I want to make sure that our constituents are benefiting by the increase in this too. But as a purely philosophical matter, you know, there are many of us in the association that feel like this should be handled by the state. This should not even be something that gets down to this level. And I think every time counties make deviations from what the public defender is recommending, puts us farther away from being able to get a true state-administered system that's uniform no matter what county or what court people are seen in. So I'm really conflicted in that, you know, A, out of tremendous respect for you and the work that you do, I know how hard it is. I certainly have an understanding and appreciation of just how difficult these cases can be for public defenders, because I think they just take a long period of time, whether anybody's trying to get them to take a long period of time or not. And, you know, this larger kind of philosophical view that this just shouldn't be, this constitutional responsibility shouldn't be evaluated on a court by court or county by county basis, that we ought to be all moving into the direction of having a truly state-run, state-funded, state-administered system, and to kind of get us all out of this, you know, nitpicking. And so given that your discretion remains, you know, my instinct is to just revert to what the public defender puts forward, because I think that's where when counties do that, that's when we're going to have the biggest likelihood of just getting the state to take care of its constitutional obligation to ensure that everybody has access to a defense. So.
Well, I do like the idea of how we do it. I don't want a public defender's office here. It'd be my preference. It's nice having local attorneys that we do bring them up in the ranks, and I appreciate the seasoned veterans sticking around, because that's who you want representing these people.
Absolutely, and I would not in any way see that would impugn that at all. I mean, as you can appreciate, we get lots of things that are pushed on us by the state that are their responsibility, and I think it's a testament to the frustration of 88 counties where we have, you know, where you get 88 diverse counties. They can never agree on anything, but they were unified behind this common purpose over 2 budgets to get us to this 100%. The work's not done, to your point. We're gonna need more, more resources moving forward. But, you know, in good conscience, it's like, look, this is a state responsibility. It really isn't a county responsibility.
No,
Is it true that the current schedule was imposed in 2000?
It's old. I mean, I don't even, was it? Yes. It was woefully inadequate.
Right, so this is 22 years later almost. Were the common pleas judges, other than you, and I know you're a common pleas judge, but were the general jurisdiction judges in favor of the new fee schedule?
I wasn't here for that meeting.
They indicated at the last meeting they were, and I believe Judge Oda submitted something as administrative judge saying that they supported the new numbers.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think both of my colleagues are correct with where they were going with it. Number one, God bless you all for being in this. You know, Warren County is such a great place. Think of it as affluent, suburban, no big problems, and then you guys are the ones dealing with the stuff that's just really, really, really bad. and so we appreciate the work that you do. I like the approach that you still are in control of your domain. You are gonna have, hey, for a, whatever it is, probation violation, that it's $1,000, let's say, according to their fee schedule. Yours, you think is $650. It is known in your community that if you exceed $650, I'm going to be challenging that. That still gives you the control, but yet in the extraordinary circumstance that it exceeds and goes up to a higher number, then theoretically, we are reimbursed on that higher amount, no problem. I kind of like that. I don't see a big downside to that. You still control what you're duly elected to control, and you unilaterally can say, this is what is acceptable in my court or not. This is just a fallback position to us, that just in case something weird happens, we're not kind of limiting what we could potentially be reimbursed for. So I agree with colleagues. I think we should just move forward with adopting that schedule. Thank you, though, Judge.
Thank you.
Adopting the state schedule?
The state schedule, yeah.
Okay, and I just want to reiterate this, that, you know, as counties increase these fees or adopt this schedule, you know, that increases the expenses that the Ohio Public Defender's Office has, which then in turn could potentially decrease the amount that they have available to reimburse counties. So as we said, it's 100% right now. It's going to 90% September 1st, I believe.
Yeah,
and could potentially.
And I appreciate you reminding us of that, but the bottom line is, we haven't increased these in 22 years.
I completely understand. I agree with everything you've said. I just would be remiss if I didn't remind you of that fact.
And we're gonna be entering into another state budget conversation with our legislators and the governor next year, and I think this is an ongoing conversation, but, you know, as you all well know, as do the parties who are here, when we finally got this accomplished, I was really reticent to immediately adjust fees upwards, and we didn't immediately do that, because I understood that what comes in this pocket is coming out the other pocket. But when you're looking at where fees have not been adjusted for such a long period of time, we've got to make that adjustment.
But,
and
yeah, but I think we're kind of saying, oh, wait, we're adjusting these maximums, our cost is gonna go up dramatically.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, because the judge
Still
still
has
controls
direct
it.
discretion.
I would have taken a totally different position if there was any way that the judge doesn't control this, but he still is gonna control it, so.
And if there's no limitation on how often you can change that schedule, if the caps change, the state reduces the percentage of reimbursement, what stops this board from then
We can
taking
change in the
action each
future.
time?
To reduce the,
On the caps.
to reduce the caps?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if there's no limitation in the statute.
Well,
Just two things I wanted to bring up. There were some different emails. I wasn't sure what Judge Oda, I thought at the last hearing, he said he supported that, so I'm trying to text him to make sure. That's what I heard last time he was here.
He actually submitted a cap schedule that I
Okay.
do not believe was the
It was not.
state's cap.
Okay, so it was below the state's cap.
I believe so,
Okay.
based upon his ability, or what he felt certain cases were worth, and his ability to go above that should he need to.
I just wanted to get that in there, because I think I said that he supported
I
it.
think, I recall, that on the fruit fees, it was something like on average a 25% increase in the fees, and so by that rationale, he made a calculation, a rough calculation around 25%. You know, then it just begs the question if there are hours for which that don't get billed or what have you.
I just didn't want to misrepresent what Judge Oda
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
so. And the other thing, I think, is, I'm not sure how other counties do it, I think it's worth looking at. It does create this situation where the commissioners are in a way making money off of increasing things, because it comes back to the commissioners rather than to the judge's budget. Now, you could pass it back through to the court, but it does create a situation where the courts have to come ask for money.
How are we making money if it's an expense over here that goes out and we're just getting it back in, it's a net zero?
Well, it is, it's just the way our budget process works. The judges have to come back and ask you for more
They
money.
base their budget based on what they think those costs are going to be. They submit it to us, we approve their budget. If it exceeds that allocation, then they would come back to us looking for, as all the other agencies and departments do, looking for increased supplemental authority.
Exactly, which all elected officials hate doing. I mean, just, you know, it's just something we hate to
Yeah,
have to
which I
do,
can
so just,
totally-
yeah.
I can totally
Yeah.
appreciate that, for sure, but I would not want it to be even conjecture around that the commissioners view it as a money-making proposition. Rather, every bit of those dollars would go back out to the court, and that's the basis on which their subsequent annual budget appropriation would be based.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And it
That's
may-
what the expectation, and, you know, I think the judges would like to hear is that that's how it flows, so.
And it may be possible, I'm sorry, Dave, it may be possible that with a new schedule, it may take a year or maybe two to really be able to understand what those costs are. In fact, that 90% allocation is, you know, still sort of in flux as they're, you know, trying to figure it out. You know, I think that's a reasonable expectation for sure. But it wouldn't surprise me if the budgeting, notwithstanding the experience, that the budgeting wouldn't be, you know, exactly right, because we don't know what kind of patterns there might be. I mean, and we, you know, I think based on what Judge Oda said about that 25%, you know, I certainly, you know, that's kind of like now putting the atmosphere on something by which we could be watching.
And Mr. Auditor, if you want additional budget, additional allocation from the county pie, you can't order us to give you that money. These guys can't.
That's what I started to say. I don't think there's any problem with,
I'm still trying to get that law changed, Commissioner, but you're right, that is, no, but it, you know, it's just the reality. Our judges hate it. We all hate having to come, you know, and ask for that. And so just kind of put it out there on everybody's behalf. It's going to have to happen as a result of this. We don't know to what extent, but it's going to have to.
Well, but again, I like the idea that the judges control their kingdom. And if Judge Kirby's had a $650 reimbursement to however long, and he says, I'm okay with it going to $750, everyone that practices in his court, if they come in with $1,000, he's going to challenge them. That's just, that, and Judge Oda, everybody else can do the exact same thing of this is what we think it's going to be, this is our fee schedule. And if you guys exceed this, you know, you've got some explaining to do.
But I think what the judges are telling us is that they like the fact that we have a fee schedule that they can rely upon to justify the fees that they set. And so I think even though it's not expressly being stated by Judge Kirby or Judge Oda on behalf of the other judges, what I think I'm hearing is that they would prefer to have a lower fee schedule because that justifies the fees that they think are appropriate.
Yeah.
As opposed to us raising it, where they'll find it more difficult to keep it lower, even though they think it should be lower, because we've set a fee schedule higher. I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But of course, I was pursuing that line of questioning to say, well, but you do have the right to set it lower still. You do have the right to still do what you want to do. And since they know that, why would they object, since while raising the fee schedule to the maximum recommended by the Ohio Public Defender's Office gives us the right of a higher reimbursement, where by not doing it, it means that we won't get that, with the exception that if the judges simply follow these schedules, it doesn't really make a difference.
Well, and I can certainly understand that you want the pressure to be where there's more scrutiny on the fees than less scrutiny on the fees. So, you know, for an attorney to have to come back to the court and ask for something in excess of a lower cap in order to get that approved, I think the question is, you know, is the fact that they've never been approved or very, 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 very rarely been approved, is that a testament to that's what the case actually costs? Or is that a testament to the perspective of the judge that he thinks that was what it costs? I mean, I mean that with no, on either side, no disrespect, but I totally understand wanting to have that fulcrum where the leverage is on wanting, forcing more justification in front of the judge. But is that a distinction without a difference? That's really what my concern would be. But, again, I have confidence in the judges in Warren County in their conservative disposition to ensure that the fees are appropriate. And I also have trust that while there's always people who abuse every system, I have trust in all the parties that are in the system that they're with good intention, only submitting fees for which work has actually been done.
Can I ask, and this question may have already been answered, but I have one more question for the public defender. Is it typical, and I think maybe this was already asked, is it atypical for you in these cases that you are handling to get to the cap? Are you very much more often, are you below the cap in your charges?
With criminal, I would say with confidence, I'm easily sorry.
You understand why I'm asking the question?
Yes, I'm sorry.
I wanted to see how meaningful this cap is.
The cap is more meaningful to me in juvenile court because of Judge Kirby's policy and the low limit, and I was a guardian ad litem for years, and Children's Services was placing kids over in Youngstown and Cincinnati and Columbus, and I was driving, and I would spend 8 hours driving to Youngstown, there and back, and a half hour to an hour visit with a child, and I was spending over $1,000 as a guardian ad litem, and I couldn't get extraordinary fees. On a typical A&D case in Judge Kirby's court these days, no one is coming close to $1,000 in my opinion, because there's stipulations at adjudication, dispositions pretty much, if you've stipulated to adjudication, you know where it's gonna go. Now, there's the exception to that. So in Judge Kirby's court on an A&D case, even when I represent a parent or a grandparent that has temporary custody, my bill is probably below $500. There's not a lot of discovery, and court time is minimal. Over in common pleas and criminal, I haven't written a letter for over $500, well, except for my murder case that I wrote a very nice letter to Judge Oda. Outside of that, I haven't written a letter in over probably 1.5 years to 2 years. My concern, though, is on those exceptional cases that I wasn't getting paid and I wasn't getting any extraordinary fees. So, in juvenile court, that's really where I took a lot of hits. And so my cap and my issue with juvenile court was for some of those extraordinary A&D cases, especially the ones where they would hire private counsel and we had contested after contested after contested hearing because of one attorney. That's also where I lost money. So honestly, I don't hit the cap very often. I don't know many people that do, but when we do hit it, we would like to be reimbursed up to a fair amount.
Okay, I understand that. Judge, do you confirm the fact that seldom they hit the cap?
Well, with Andrea, I think it's a true statement. She's very conservative in her billing. I'm sorry, yeah, and Marcelina. There's a reason why these two are advocating on behalf of the bar. There are some, though, that would would hit the limits, I would think. But see, in all fairness to some of them, they're brand new. If Andrea or Marcelina gets a felonious assault, they don't need to research the law. A brand new lawyer needs to look it up and see what the elements are. So there's a little bit more work, and we build that into it because it is a learning court. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but I think you're right. I think it's just going to come down to us looking at them a little bit more closely, and maybe if people know that they're able to get their fair share on each case, there won't be a tendency to,
Make it up on the background,
yeah, yeah,
if I may, Your Honor.
yeah, no, that's correct.
Anything else? Have a motion on this? Any further
Can I
discussion?
ask for clarification? So you're wanting to do the maximum state schedule?
Well, I want to hear
Is that-
discussion on this.
And that's what, because you asked for a motion, I was.
No, so I want to know if you want any more discussion on the fee schedules?
I mean, if you've worked on this issue, a lot of times, I mean, you carry a
Look,
lot of weight on me with the, especially the juvenile stuff.
My thinking would be to adopt the fee schedule to, welcome the scrutiny that the court brings on. And as Bruce rightly points out, the Lord giveth and the Lord can taketh away. We can, if we feel like it has opened the door up to, I don't want to say abuse, but perhaps gaming of it, then I think we have the authority at any time to adjust the fee schedule. That's kind of where my instinct would be. But I'm certainly, I don't feel stridently about it, but that's where my instinct would be. I think if we could pick some arbitrary amount as, I don't want to say arbitrary, a thoughtful proposal, but it's like, okay. But I'm with you, Dave. I think the court does maintain its discretion. I have no doubt that parties will be operating under that understanding of the discretion. And let's kind of see where it is.
Right, attorneys still know they're practicing in Warren County, and
Yeah.
bills are gonna be reviewed.
I mean,
They
and-
don't, you're.
And I'm
it's-
just super sympathetic to, just knowing, working in with children's services as I have, and understanding, those cases, not from a jurist's point of view or an attorney's point of view, but from just understanding how many kids we have in custody and where they're located, and even the costs associated with our own social workers to go and visit a lot of these kids that are not placed in county or even in surrounding counties, is really laborious.
Okay. David, anything else?
I was following that's why we wanted you to
Yeah,
input on this. We were
we had this conversation, but we wanted you to be able to.
helping guide us down this
Yeah.
fee path.
Okay, well, I'm in favor of the caps recommended by the Ohio Public Defender's Office. I also agree that I do not know what the appropriate amount of fees in any particular case should be. I am not disagreeing with the recommendations that have been given to us by our judges, but at the same time, they retain the jurisdiction and they have the power to determine the fees in any particular case. And since fees are really based upon each individual case, not a cap, because the cap's only related to what will be reimbursed. It's not really related to what will be charged and reimbursed by us. Have a motion?
So moved?
And yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Can I make maybe a recommendation that the clerk contacts us in a year and we look at the numbers and just see where it's at? And I have no idea how much it's gonna change, but that's something we'll submit to the commissioners in a year, what the difference is year over year.
Yeah, we definitely will be watching this, and I would anticipate that our judges will make us watch it too. Even if we
When
weren't.
do you want it effective, the new fee schedule?
Do we make that
Auditor,
decision?
when do we make this effective?
We can make it effective immediately, can't we?
Sure. It'd be fine, immediately.
Then yes.
Okay, so we need a motion to for executive session.
Do we go to executive
Hiring
session
within
again?
children's services.
So I move that we head into executive session for the purposes of hiring for children's services.
And yes.